Hello everyone, Anas Abu Saleh here. Today's video is going to be the first in hopefully a series of videos where I talk about the various influences and inspirations behind each of the short stories in my first anthology, Tales from Mistland and Other Oddities, Volume 1, which is available on Amazon in paperback and EPUB digital, and the link for that is going to be in the description below. And yeah, one thing to keep in mind: these videos are going to be spoiler heavy. So if you haven't read the story and you hate spoilers, I suggest you exit the tab now. With that said, let's dive right into it. I'm not going to uh, I'm not going to talk about these stories in the order in which they appear in the book. Rather, I'm going to talk about them in the order in which I wrote them. I'm going to talk about the ones that I wrote first, and then maybe afterward I might talk a little bit about the stories that my co-authors wrote, Jim, Kyle, Felix, and Brian. With all that preamble out of the way, let's get started. The first story is Dead Man's Trial. Believe it or not, Dead Man's Trial is actually the first short story I actually finished writing out of after high school. It's the first short story I actually finished writing as an adult. Before that, I'd start something and then get distracted, lose motivation, lose interest, and I just throw it away. But Dead Man's Trial was the first I actually sat there and finished it start to finish. Dead Man's Trial, I actually wrote it for a creative writing class in community college. In fact, the very same writing class where I met two of my co-authors, Brian and Kyle, who I am lucky enough to still be friends with till today. And yeah, so there were a couple of inspirations for Dead Man's Trial. Uh, there are a couple of them. One of the first ones that I can recall off the top of my head is Dante Alighieri's The Divine Comedy, specifically the Inferno portion, which I had to read as part of my 12th grade AP English class. And that kind of stuck with me, that idea of a three-part series about a person's journey through the afterlife. And that kind of always kind of stuck with me. And in fact, when I first wrote Dead Man's Trial, I was originally envisioning it as a trilogy itself, with the second part being equivalent to Purgatory, with the ascent up the mountain, and then the third and final part, equivalent to Paradiso, being what happens when they get to the top of the mountain, what they find there. But I never could find the motivation. Like, how would I start it? How would it go? So as of right now, Dead Man's Trial is a one and done, and it works that way. At least I feel it does, and no one has told me otherwise. Uh, one of the other one of the other inspirations behind Dead Man's Trial was the video game Journey. Came out I think over a decade ago at this point, if I remember correctly. I never played the game, but I saw the reviews and I absolutely adored Austin Wintory's soundtrack for it. And that central premise of a lone figure wandering the desert to reach a mountain in the distance, that visual also stuck in my head very clearly. And so, like it kind of like it meshed well with my desire to write like a story about a person's journey through the afterlife. So that's how the two ideas kind of got welded. How I kind of took that how the Dante Alighieri influence kind of got mapped onto the journey aesthetic, if you will. As for the backstory behind Giovanni and the Emperor's son, why he murdered the Emperor's son, and why the Emperor allowed why the Emperor did what he did, and that provoked Giovanni, and all that stuff, all that backstory, so to speak, was inspired by two separate things, but they kind of overlap thematically. So the first event was the Massacre of the Latins. Uh, it's probably not a very well-known event, but this took place, I believe, around 11 in the 1100s, if I remember correctly. And it basically what happened in Constantinople, which is modern day Istanbul, but back then it was Constantinople, the capital of the Eastern Roman Empire. The Eastern Orthodox majority of the city massacred the Catholic minority, which back then they called the Latins because Rome, the Latin language, whereas the Eastern Orthodox used Greek. Anyway, the Eastern Orthodox majority slaughtered the Catholic minority, and that was something I read that I found kind of interesting because that was one of the events that led to the Fourth Crusade and the sacking of Constantinople and the temporary establishment of the Latin Empire and the further disintegration between the Eastern and Western churches. When I was just reading random history on Wikipedia and stuff, but I found that kind of interesting because it also kind of reminded me of uh, the Jewish pogroms in throughout medieval and even up until recent history. You still find it in like even in the 20th century, you found pogroms, unfortunately. But that idea of people blaming a minority for their problems, whether it was plague or famine or just a random death that they would attribute to poisoning instead of just accepting it as a natural death. That idea of like scapegoating a minority because they're different, they're other, so that, they're not you, so you could safely think of them as being evil or wicked or what have you. That idea kind of like stuck with me, and I felt it was kind of a good fit for the story. Like, what would, a good call, a good kind of connection between the, 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 between the living portion, the part where it's about Giovanni's life, the main character's life, and the afterlife. Linking the two together. What led him to commit such a horrible crime. And how do I make it both such that you understand where he's coming from, but you also understand why he's in the situation that he's in. How like his journey through the afterlife isn't smooth. You know, because there's a lot of guilt, there's a lot of shame, there's a lot of sin involved in what he did. But at the same time, to kind of pull a quote from Shakespeare, I think of the Merchant of Venice with Shylock. Does a Jew not have? I could be wrong. I could be wrong or paraphrasing it, and people who know better could correct me, obviously. But yeah, like does a Jew not have eyes, ears, a tongue, a heart, Again, going back to the whole massacre of the Latins and Jewish pogroms, that idea, that we tend to look on people that are different from us as being sometimes less than human. You can think of I don't know, the slavery in the South, during before the Civil War, like the way the justifications that people would use to justify enslaving their fellow human beings, and among other things, they would see them as cursed or mongrel or all these other excuses that people use to say these people are less than us, therefore we can treat them as less than us, you know. And so that's what inspired me to like, have, the emperor uses Giovanni's people as an excuse, to point the finger at them, for the city's problems, the empire's problems, and away from himself, obviously, and so the majority just go out there and kill all of Giovanni's people, the minority, and he happens to be away, so he doesn't get caught up in it. But when he comes back, he finds his home destroyed, his livelihood destroyed, his everything he cared about is gone. So of course, he does what a lot of people would do. He wants revenge. He wants to make the emperor feel what he feels. So he sneaks into the palace and he thinks, I've lost my child, I've lost my wife, I've lost my home. I can't take away the emperor's home, and I probably can't kill the emperor. He has bodyguards all the time, but maybe I can reach his son. His son's kind of like I didn't. His son's kind of easier to reach, so I'll go after him, make him feel what it's like to lose a son, and So I think that that kind of covers what I want to say about Dead Man's Trial. I apologize for the stuttering and the rambling and all that stuff. I'm not really used to talking in front of a camera. I'm much more used to kind of like texting where I can like take my time with every single sentence and make sure, what I want to say comes out properly the first time. But yeah, so that's kind of like about Dead Man's Trial. I will say that the version I wrote for that creative writing class wasn't entirely the version that made it into the book. I didn't like the ending entirely that I wrote for the class. So sometime after the class, I ended up rewriting the entire ending conversation between Giovanni and the Emperor's son. And I ended up changing some other details, like for example, for reasons I don't even remember at this point, Giovanni's original name was Lewin, which is, if I remember correctly, is Welsh. I have no idea why I gave him a Welsh name, but I kind of realized it didn't really fit with the aesthetic or the story or the influences, so I changed it to Giovanni, which is an Italian name. Anyway, next video will hopefully be about Sorrow's End, which is the second story that I wrote in chronologically speaking. But again, if you or anyone else would like to read the stories yourself, and share the book with a friend or a loved one, leave a review or whatever, again, it's Tales from Mistland and Other Oddities. The link is in the description, and it's available on Amazon right now. There's also some promotional artwork and music. The music I've uploaded to this YouTube channel right here, and the promotional art is on my Tumblr, which you can find either in the back of the book at the very end of the acknowledgments section, or just scroll down to my author profile on Amazon. Thank you all so much for your time, and have a wonderful day.